With value, we're rating things on a scale from pure white to pure black. Achromatic value is going to be shades of gray, what we're used to when we think of value, say, from a drawing class. Chromatic value encompasses two aspects. One, you can have value variation within a hue category. We have such a thing as a light red. We tend to call it pink. We also have dark reds. So that's one aspect of chromatic value, that you can make a value scale within a hue category. The other aspect of chromatic value is that there are value differences between the pure versions of our colors. So, for example, a North American free-range yellow is going to be lighter in value than the domesticated violet. It's just how it comes out of the rainbow, say. What we wind up doing then is understanding that I can have variation of value between hue categories. Yellow is lighter than orange, is lighter than red, but I can also have variation within the hue category. One trick, though, is that because of subtractive color mixing, generally, if you're going to push a value or a hue category to a value that's not its natural state, there's a greater chance of the pigments failing, which is why a lot of times when you try to make yellow dark, it'll maybe shift to green because it's a more fragile pigment in mixtures. It's less of a problem with violet going light because the white that we're adding is actually a cool color, and so it doesn't shift the violet as much. But you will get a really low intensity violet. So subtractive color mixing is still happening. A couple of specific terms for value. The first one we want to know is chiaroscuro. You have to r when you say it. Imagine that you're Joey and you're saying, "How you doing?" to somebody when you are describing chiaroscuro. It is Italian, you can tell from the r. The chi is light, scuro is dark, and it's literally just light dark in translation. You chi a ch in Italian. What we're talking about with chiaroscuro is using a full range of value to communicate a sense of volume. In other words, the strong highlight, say, on the girl's arm, transitioning smoothly through a full range of value to that deep dark shadow on her arm makes it look round. It gives it a sense of volume. So chiaroscuro is something that we can use to describe the way in which we're using value variations to communicate a sense of volume. One of the things that you're going to notice with a lot of art terms, in addition to the fact that we can never agree on anything, is that we steal a lot of French and Italian terms because they are Romance languages. And those Romance languages are how you're going to get your hooks into the future doctor or lawyer, which is who you need to marry to have a successful art career. So practice your r when you say chiaroscuro. You take somebody to an opening, they don't know that it's really for you a cheap date because you don't have to pay for anything because they'll feed you and show you art. But you will impress that future doctor or lawyer, and then you can say, "Oh, look at the chiaroscuro on that one," and they'll know that your tongue is limber. Grisai. Grisai is French, so you have to sigh when you say Grisai, is basically a description of deliberately limiting your palette to black and white. You're making a gray image. Now, we don't tend to describe a black and white photograph as Grisai, because what we're often thinking about with Grisai is something where you're deliberately choosing not to use the color. So while technically a black and white photograph or a charcoal drawing would qualify as Grisai because you're working with grays, Most of the time, we'd only describe, say, a painting or something where you're deliberately limiting to just black and white, as opposed to that being kind of the assumption about that medium. But it's fun to say, so we're going to say it again. Grisai. Gris meaning gray, ai meaning in the manner of, so in a gray manner. Grisai. When we're talking about tenebrism, it relates to value because tenebrism is a description of using dramatic lights and darks, often to create a sense of mood or drama or excitement. And so in this Artemisia Gentileschi painting, we're seeing that the single light source of the candle gives really strong light in some areas, but then we disappear into this pool of darkness in the background. It's very dramatic, which is appropriate for a scene where she has snuck into the enemy commander's headquarters and cut off his head. So what we have with tenebrism is the use of lighting for dramatic effect. There are a lot of other terms related to the use of value in art. Most of them you probably either already know or are going to get drilled into you in your drawing classes. But a highlight is the part that's light. You then have a midtone. You'll have a shadow. Don't forget that most of the time the core of the shadow is the darkest part away from the light source and will frequently be darker than the cast shadow because the cast shadow will also have whatever value the object is resting on. So if we have a cast shadow on a light surface, it might actually be lighter than the core of the shadow. And there will usually be some reflected light bouncing back up. So these are all terms that you can figure out, but they relate to value.